In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to scale your online business to over $30,000 per month. My name is Michael. I built multiple six-figure businesses, and now I help other people do the same. Now, just to show some proof, my company made over $300,000 with over $140,000 being profit after I paid myself a salary. Also, full disclosure, none of this is from course sales. I don't have any problem with people who do sell courses. I myself have a mentorship program, but I don't like when people flex their course numbers as their actual business revenue because those are two very different things. Now, to show you how long I've been doing this for, I actually went back to when I first opened my business bank account. And as you can see, I was able to make over $10,000 my very first month having a business account. Keep in mind, this wasn't my first month in business. I'd been in business for probably close to a year at this point, but it does go to show that I have been doing this for a while, so I promise you, I do know what I'm talking about. Now, when it comes to scaling an online business, something I often hear from people is that they simply think that they need more traffic. And while getting more traffic is normally a good thing, if you don't have the right systems in place, getting more traffic isn't going to solve your problems. What people don't understand is that more eyeballs does not always equal to more leads. Think of this like having a leaky bucket. You can keep pouring more water into a bucket full of holes, but the water is just going to keep leaking out of the sides. So before you worry about fixing your traffic, you need to worry about fixing your leaks. Depending on what your offer is and what your industry is, these numbers are going to vary, but in general, I like to see a 20% booking rate, a 60% show rate, and a 20% close rate. Keep in mind, these are just rough numbers of what I like to see in my business. They can vary a little bit, but this is just to give you a general idea. Now, what does this look like in the real world? Well, out of 100 leads, I like to see at least 20 of them book a call. So that gives us a 20% booking rate, just like we said over here. Out of those 20, I like to see that 12 of them showed up for their call. Now, I realize it says 12% because it is 12% of 100, but it's also a 60% show rate if you divide it by 20. So just like over here, 60% show rate, that leaves us with 12 showed calls. Out of the 12 that showed up, I like to see at least 3 of them close. That puts us about a 25% closing rate. So, a little bit higher than this, but generally within the same range. Now, out of those 3 close, I like to see that 2 of them were retained long-term or upsold. So something that I see a lot of people make a mistake on is not retaining or upselling their clients long-term. The absolute hardest part about sales is getting the sale in the first place. So if you only sell a client one time and then you never sell to them again, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. I don't like how often dating and sales gets compared, but sometimes it does kind of work. Let's imagine you had 100 matches on Tinder, 20 of them gave you their number, 12 of them went on a date with you, and out of those 12, you had 3 really good dates. You really liked the girl really liked you both had a great time. Well, if you just never ever spoke to them again, that'd be seen as a pretty big wasted opportunity. However, in sales, people do this all the time. They spend all this effort to get a sale, and then they just never speak to their lead ever again. If you did a good job fulfilling on whatever it is that you're selling, retaining them as a client or upselling them down the line shouldn't be very difficult at all, and it's a very easy way to add recurring revenue to your business. Like I said earlier, we want to find ways to fix the leaky holes in the bucket before we worry about pouring more water into it. So now that we've seen what good numbers look like, how exactly do we get there? Well, first, you want to work on finding your ICP. ICP, or Ideal Client Profile, sometimes called Ideal Customer Profile, really just refers to the ideal client that you have in mind for your business. So if you could magically make your ideal client appear in front of you, what exactly would they look like? When it comes to finding your ICP, you really need to understand what their problems are, what their desires are, and what their fears are. You also need to know where they hang out, both online and offline. So which platforms they're on, what communities they're in, what areas in the world or in your city are they, and you also need to know what they respond to. So stories, results, deals, education, etc. A great example of someone doing this the wrong way is when Walmart tried to enter into the Brazilian market. A lot of people don't know this, but Walmart actually spent hundreds of millions of dollars to get into the Brazilian market, and it ended up being a massive failure. The reason why is because Walmart's whole business model is everyday low prices. The whole idea behind Walmart is you go there and you know that you're getting the lowest price available. The thing is, in Brazil, their culture is a little bit different. People there respond better to one-off sales rather than everyday low prices. So in their minds, they would rather go to a specialty store where they think they're getting a good deal because it's a limited time thing, rather than going to a store and just assuming that it's going to be the lowest price available. So this just goes to show that even a multi-billion-dollar company can end up losing if they don't fully understand who their ICP is. The way to avoid having that issue is by going as narrow as possible. If you focus on a very narrow and dialed in niche, you can end up getting far more leads than if you were to go more broad. The reason why is because people view you as an expert, everything feels more customized, they feel like you have authority, and it helps you be more focused on who exactly it is that you're targeting. So, for example, if someone was a dating coach, it's better to say, I helped middle-aged finance executives find a wife, rather than saying, I help anyone who is single and wants a girlfriend. You might think that the guy who's going after anyone who's single has a bigger pool, so they have a bigger market, but in reality, you end up getting way more leads and way more high quality leads if you get more dialed in on who it is that you're targeting. Once you have this dialed in, then you can finally start to work on your offer. What a lot of business owners don't realize is that your offer is what really drives the leads, not the content volume that you're putting out. So you can post as much content as you want and you can spend as much money as you want on ads, but if you don't have a good offer, then you're not going to get any leads. A saying that I like is that leads are the reward for having an irresistible offer. Imagine if someone was selling a house in New York or LA for $100. They wouldn't need to do any ads, they wouldn't need to post any videos, and chances are they would still get tons and tons of leads. The reason why is because it's a really good offer. Now, obviously, it's a bit of an extreme example, but the point is you need to find a way to make your offer as appealing as possible. And this is where understanding your audience really comes into play. If you can identify what they actually want and find a way to make your offer more appealing, you'll get more leads based on that alone. Your lead quality will also be higher, which means you can charge higher prices and have a higher closing rate and have a better overall experience dealing with the clients. And the way to do this is by always leading with value. So this can mean giving away something for free or making some sort of guarantee on your service or product or creating some scarcity or showing some proof. Basically, you just need to do something that gives them FOMO. You need to do something that really incentivizes them and makes them think that your offer is so valuable that they would be stupid to say no. A common thing that business owners misunderstand is that no one really wants your product. What they actually want is the results that the product gives them. So, for example, a kid doesn't really want an Xbox or a PlayStation because it's an Xbox or a PlayStation. What they want is the feeling or the fun that they get from playing the games and having fun with their friends. So rather than focusing on your product, you need to focus on the results. With my consulting offer, I guarantee that people make their money back in the first 90 days. This removes a ton of risk and it makes it easy for people to say yes. When it comes to making your offer, there's a lot that goes into it, and this is something that I help people with, but realistically, you just need to find some way to truly make it valuable. This is going to take some time, but I highly recommend you spend a lot of time thinking about this and crafting it because this is one of the most important parts of a business. Once you have your offer dialed in, then you can finally go all in on trying to get leads. Now, there are a lot of different ways to get leads. I made a pretty big list here. First, we have paid channels. Paid channels include Facebook, Instagram ads, Google ads, and LinkedIn ads. So Facebook and Instagram, great for local and B2C offers. Google ads, good for intent-based, great for services that people search for. And LinkedIn ads are good for high-value B2B targeting. So if you're a business selling to other businesses, LinkedIn is a pretty good place to go. Next, we have organic channels. Organic channels include content marketing, so videos, posts, and blogs that educate. We have SEO, so long-term organic discovery, think things like Google My Business or things like Google Maps. We have YouTube, which is good for authority, education, and evergreen reach. That's what I'm doing right now. And then we also have TikToks and Shorts, which is good for fast attention and brand exposure. Realistically, I like to tell people TikTok and Shorts are mostly just for getting people onto long-form content, but that's not a hard rule. Some people do really well only posting short-form content. Next, we have outbound channels, which are some of the hardest, but also can be some of the most rewarding. So we have cold email, which are personalized, value first, cold DMs, LinkedIn and Instagram primarily. You can DM anyone pretty much anywhere, but these are the two ones with the highest ROI. And then we have partnerships, so cross promotion, joint ventures, and referrals. Finally, we have offline options, which is really just networking events, speaking gigs, and local sponsorships, or flyers, postcards, and local partnerships. Now, in general, I like to recommend that people do at least one paid option, one organic option, and one outbound option. A problem that I see is people try to do 10 things at once, and then they end up doing all of them fairly poorly. Instead, it's way better to just pick one or two of these, maybe 3 of them max, that you're going to do very well, and then spend an unreasonable amount of time getting as good as possible on those 3 methods. I can't tell you exactly which one is best because it's going to vary depending on the business, but I like to say the best channel is going to be where your customers already spend their attention. So if you do mobile detailing, then maybe an offline option like a exotic car meetup might not be a bad idea. But if you do marketing for white collar businesses, then you're probably better off doing things like LinkedIn. The main thing is you just really need to commit to whatever options you pick, because learning these is a skill in and of itself, and it takes a lot of time to get good at. So if you keep hopping from one to the next, then you're never really going to get good at them, and then you're going to assume that it's a bad way to get leads when in reality you just didn't stick with it long enough. Where your leads come from is very important because it makes closing a lot easier. And this brings us to the next step, which is sales. People get so focused on their leads, but in reality, more leads means nothing if you can't convert them into actual sales. I think sales gets kind of a bad rap. When I first started out, I thought sales was a gross word. I really didn't like the connotation that came with it. But I've come to learn that sales doesn't have to be a bad thing if you're an ethical person and you have a product that you can actually deliver on. If you just focus on solving problems and you aren't some high pressure salesman, you'll find that sales doesn't have to be that bad of a thing. All business comes down to is just solving problems. So sales is really just the process of figuring out if this person has a problem that you can solve and if they want you to be the person to solve it. This is why it's important to always qualify your leads before you actually get on the call. When people first start out, they usually have a scarcity mindset. So they're so afraid of missing out on a sale and they just want their business to do well. Maybe they spent a lot of time on content. Maybe they're spending a lot of money on ads. So they really, really want to get a sale. But what they end up doing is taking sales calls or trying to convince people that have no business being on the sales call in the first place. If you're afraid of losing a sale, you end up trying to convince clients that aren't a good fit, which ends up wasting your time, and it also wastes their time, which doesn't really do anyone a favor. I made this mistake when I first started out. I was spending a lot of money on ads and I just wanted to recoup some of that money. So I was trying to convince people that, hey, this is a good product, you could benefit from it. But really, it just lowers your morale. And if someone doesn't want to buy from you, they're not going to buy from you. So it's either a good fit or it isn't. Sales really comes down to figuring out what the client's problems are and if you're the one who can solve them. So if you're just trying to sell your product, but you don't know how to actually identify the client's problem, guide them through the journey, and show them how your solution is the solution that they need, then you're likely missing out on a lot of money because of that. Also, I want to add in that you should always add follow-ups. You also need to be tracking all of this. A lot of people never track their numbers, but it's hard to ever improve if you don't know where you're starting from. So definitely you need to track your closing rates and review, videos or sales scripts or whatever it is that you're using for your sales process. Now, as important as sales is, even if you get good at sales, it's not always enough to scale a company. In order to scale properly, you need to have systems in place. This means you need to have a clear funnel of where your client is at in their journey. I recommend using a CRM like Go High Level, but there's plenty of other good ones out there. There's also HubSpot, there's Pipedrive, there's Salesforce. Basically, you just need something that can track your leads. This way, you know where everyone's at in the client journey, and it makes it so much easier to keep track of things and to actually scale your business properly. You also need to work on automating things, so things like lead forms, email responders, text reminders. Pretty much anything you can do to free up your own time is very valuable, so don't put this off. This is something that I waited way too long to do. The sooner you automate things, the easier it is to scale and the better it is all around. I promise you. It takes a little bit of work up front, whether you do it yourself or whether you pay someone, but this is 100% worth it. When it comes to systems, you also need a way to follow up quickly. So I like to say within 5 minutes. I read a stat that said people are 21 more times likely to convert when they're followed up within the first 5 minutes versus waiting 30 minutes. On top of all of this, you need to be tracking everything. In business, what gets measured gets managed. So if you aren't tracking things, there's no way to tell which direction it is that you're going. This is exactly how you can scale an online business to $30,000 a month or more. I've done it several times myself, and I've helped plenty of other people do the same. If you need help with any of this, feel free to click the link in the description, and I'll see if I can help you out. Either way, I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one.